My beloved child, pause here for a moment, because what you are about to hear was not meant to pass by you like another ordinary message. Something has been building quietly behind the scenes, something hidden beneath silence, hesitation, distance, and all the words that were never spoken. And now, in this fictional message of divine reflection, imagine heaven drawing your attention to one sentence that has been sitting heavily inside your soulmate's heart. This is my last chance to tell you everything, please don't ignore me. Do not rush past those words. There is more inside them than desperation. There is history. There is regret. There is tenderness. There is a truth that has been delayed for so long that even they no longer know how to say it without trembling. Something in them has reached the place where hiding feels heavier than speaking, and that is why this moment carries a different energy. They are not simply thinking about you. They are confronting everything they have avoided about you, about themselves, and about the connection they tried to understand with logic when their heart had already understood it in silence. Stay here, because the first thing you need to know is that their silence was never as empty as it looked. There were nights when they almost reached out. There were moments when your name appeared on their screen, in their thoughts, in conversations they pretended were about something else. There were sentences typed and erased, messages rewritten until the words lost their meaning, and quiet moments where they wondered whether you had already moved too far beyond them to ever hear what they were finally becoming brave enough to say. They wanted the perfect moment. They wanted certainty. They wanted to know that if they opened the door, you would not close it before they finished explaining. But life does not always give perfect moments. Sometimes truth arrives late, carrying all the weight of the time it wasted. And now they are beginning to understand something that unsettles them deeply: waiting has not protected them. Waiting may have cost them something precious. You may have believed they did not care enough. You may have interpreted distance as indifference, inconsistency as lack of feeling, or hesitation as proof that your connection never meant what you hoped it meant. But imagine for a moment that the deepest struggle was not whether they felt something. Imagine the struggle was what they were supposed to do with feelings they could not control. There are people who run from what means little, but there are also people who run from what means too much. Not because love is dangerous, but because love reveals things. It exposes insecurities. It shows a person where they are still afraid. It removes the masks that function perfectly everywhere else. Your soulmate may have known how to be confident in other parts of life, yet when it came to you, something inside them became strangely unguarded. And being unguarded frightened them more than they ever admitted. That is why this message is not beginning with a confession. It is beginning with the reason the confession took so long. They needed to understand themselves before they could explain themselves to you. They needed to look at choices they once defended and admit that some of them were made from fear. They needed to recognize that keeping you at a safe emotional distance did not remove the connection, it only made the absence louder. And recently, something changed. Perhaps it was a memory that returned unexpectedly. Perhaps someone said something about love that landed too close to the truth. Perhaps they saw a place, heard a song, came across an old message, or experienced an ordinary moment that suddenly reminded them how different life felt when they believed you might still be part of their future. Whatever the trigger was, it opened a door they had spent a long time trying to keep shut. And once that door opened, memories began coming back differently. Not as random nostalgia, but as evidence. They remembered the small things you said that they did not appreciate enough at the time. They remembered the way you noticed when something was wrong even when they insisted they were fine. They remembered conversations that seemed simple then but now feel strangely important. They remembered the way they felt after speaking with you, the strange calm, the emotional charge, the feeling that something unseen had shifted inside them. And this is where their realization became uncomfortable. They had been waiting for some dramatic sign that you mattered while overlooking the quiet signs that had been there all along. But there is something else, my child, and this is where the story begins to deepen. Their fear is no longer only about losing you. Their fear is that you may never know the truth about why they behaved the way they did. They cannot control what you choose, and somewhere within them they are finally accepting that. Yet what they cannot accept is the possibility that you may carry the wrong story forever. They do not want you believing that you were forgettable. They do not want you believing that your care went unnoticed. They do not want you thinking you imagined the moments of connection, the intensity, the subtle shifts, the way they sometimes looked at you as if there were words behind their eyes they could not release. Their greatest regret may not simply be that they stayed silent. It may be that their silence made you question your own worth. There is a difference between wanting someone back and wanting someone to know the truth. Your soulmate is beginning to understand that difference. This is why what they want to tell you is becoming more honest. They may still hope there is a future. They may still wonder whether a door could reopen. But underneath that hope is something more mature than possession. They want to take responsibility for the confusion. They want to say, in their own way, you were not wrong for feeling what you felt. I was scared of what I felt. And those are not easy words for someone who has spent a long time pretending they were unaffected. Imagine the conversation they have been having with themselves lately. It begins quietly, why am I still thinking about this? Then it becomes, why does this still matter to me? Then the question becomes more dangerous, what if I made the wrong choice? And finally, the question they can no longer escape, what if I lose the chance to tell them what really happened? That final question changes everything, because regret becomes real when a person realizes time is not standing still waiting for their courage to catch up. You are continuing. Life is continuing. Opportunities are moving. Hearts are healing, changing, learning, becoming stronger. And your soulmate senses that you are not the same person who once waited patiently for clarity. They feel that difference even if they cannot explain how. Perhaps you have become quieter. Perhaps you have stopped chasing answers. Perhaps your energy no longer reaches toward them in the same way. Perhaps you have simply become tired of interpreting silence. Whatever the reason, they sense that something in you has shifted from waiting to releasing. And strangely, that may be the very thing that has forced them to confront themselves. When someone believes you will always be there, courage can be postponed. But when they realize your life may continue without their explanation, suddenly every unsaid word becomes urgent. Still, do not mistake urgency for panic. The deeper truth is more meaningful. They are not only afraid of losing access to you. They are afraid of losing the opportunity to become honest in your presence. There is a difference. One comes from ego, the other comes from awakening. And this fictional divine message asks you to notice that difference carefully. If truth arrives, let truth stand on its own. You do not owe an immediate answer simply because someone finally found courage. You do not owe your heart back because someone expresses regret. Your worth was never dependent on their realization. But there may still be healing in hearing what was hidden, especially if you once blamed yourself for what their fear created. Because here is one of the things they may finally be ready to admit: you were never too much. Your depth was not the problem. Your care was not the problem. Your desire for honesty was not the problem. The problem was that being truly seen required them to see themselves too. You reflected things they had avoided. Around you, excuses did not feel as convincing. Their emotional patterns became visible. The walls they called independence began to look more like protection. You did not intentionally force those realizations, your presence simply made certain truths difficult to ignore. And when a person is not prepared to change, they sometimes distance themselves from the person who makes change feel necessary. They may have tried to convince themselves that space would solve it. They may have poured energy into other priorities, conversations, responsibilities, distractions, perhaps even other connections. But somewhere underneath all of it, there remained a question they could never completely silence: why did that person affect me so deeply? Time answered slowly. It was not because you were perfect. It was not because every interaction was effortless. It was because something about you reached beyond the version of themselves they showed everyone else. You made them imagine honesty, closeness, accountability, partnership, vulnerability. And those ideas felt beautiful from a distance but overwhelming when they became real. What they could not say then was, "I care about you enough that I am terrified of disappointing you." So instead, they may have disappointed you without explanation. They could not say, "I am afraid you will see the parts of me I have not healed." So they hid parts of themselves until hiding created more damage than honesty ever would have. They could not say, "I do not know if I am ready for something this real." So their actions may have made you believe they wanted something less. They were translating fear into behavior, and you were left trying to interpret a language they themselves did not understand. Now, however, they are beginning to understand. And when understanding comes late, it comes with grief. Not the kind of grief that destroys a person, but the quiet grief of realizing how easily something precious can be mishandled when fear is mistaken for wisdom. They remember opportunities to speak and wonder why they stayed quiet. They remember moments when you gave them room to be honest and wonder why they chose ambiguity. They remember your patience and realize it was not weakness. It was care. They remember when you pulled away and now understand you were not punishing them. You were protecting something in yourself that had already been stretched too far. That realization may be the reason behind the words, "Please don't ignore me." It is not merely a demand for attention. In its most sincere form, it is a plea to be allowed to finish a story they left incomplete. They know you may not want to reopen what hurt. They know there is a possibility that you will hear them and still choose your own path. They know their truth does not erase the past. And strangely, that awareness is what is making their desire to speak more genuine. They are no longer imagining a perfect confession that fixes everything instantly. They are imagining a real conversation where they finally say what they should have said, then allow you to decide what those words mean for you. But the most surprising part has not yet been revealed, because what they want to tell you is not only about the past. Something about their future has become connected to this decision. There is a choice approaching them, perhaps emotional, relational, or deeply personal, and they have realized they cannot make it honestly while pretending you had no impact on their heart. They have been standing at an internal crossroads. One path allows them to keep living exactly as they have been living, safe, controlled, somewhat disconnected from the vulnerability they fear. The other path requires them to become the person capable of telling the truth even when the outcome is uncertain. And for the first time, they may be leaning toward the second path. This is where heaven, in the imagery of this story, would whisper something important to you: do not confuse their awakening with your assignment. You do not have to rescue them from their emotions. You do not have to make your soulmate senses that. It unsettles them, but it also makes them respect you in a new way. There was a time when they may have assumed your care meant permanence regardless of their behavior. Now they understand that care without reciprocity eventually becomes distance. They are beginning to see the strength behind the quiet decisions you made. Every time you resisted reaching out just to relieve the ache, you were learning self-respect. Every time you stopped over-explaining yourself, you were learning boundaries. Every time you chose peace over another confusing cycle, you were becoming someone who could hear a confession without being consumed by it. This is why your energy feels different to them now. They may not have language for it, but they feel it. You are no longer asking silently, "Will you choose me?" You are becoming someone who asks, "Does this connection choose honesty, respect, and growth?" That question carries power because it changes the entire dynamic. It moves you from waiting for a verdict to evaluating what is being offered. And your soulmate knows, perhaps for the first time, that if they come toward you now, they cannot come with the same half-answers. So they are rehearsing the truth. Not a dramatic speech. Not a perfect movie scene. The truth. And it may begin more softly than you expect. They may tell you that they thought distance would make their feelings disappear. They may tell you it did the opposite. They may admit that they kept comparing other moments to what they felt around you. They may confess that something about your absence made them realize how much emotional space your presence once occupied. They may say they were afraid of commitment, afraid of rejection, afraid of repeating old mistakes, afraid of being known deeply enough that they could no longer hide behind old patterns. But then they may say something you have waited a long time to understand: "I knew I was hurting you, and I did not know how to fix it without admitting I was scared." That sentence would not excuse what happened, but it could finally explain the contradiction you witnessed. The moments of warmth followed by distance. The interest followed by silence. The closeness followed by retreat. Their behavior may have looked random from the outside, but inside them it was a battle between desire and fear. Each time desire brought them closer, fear reminded them what they might lose if they truly opened their heart. And there is another confession beneath that one. They may have underestimated you. Not your attractiveness, not your kindness, not the obvious qualities anyone could see. They underestimated your ability to walk away with dignity. They thought your love meant you would remain emotionally available forever. They assumed there would always be another moment, another chance, another opening. They did not understand that even the most patient heart eventually stops standing in a doorway where no one enters. When they realized you were genuinely capable of choosing peace over uncertainty, something in them shifted. This may be why recent thoughts of you have felt stronger. It is not because some magical force is controlling them. It is because reality has finally become louder than avoidance. They are seeing consequences. They are seeing that connection requires participation. They are seeing that timing matters. They are seeing that love cannot survive forever as an unspoken possibility. At some point, it must become honest or it becomes a memory. And that is what terrifies them now, the idea of you becoming only a memory. A person they once almost told. A person they once almost chose clearly. A person they once imagined building something real with but allowed fear to interrupt. They can picture themselves months or years from now wondering what might have happened if they had spoken while there was still a chance to be heard. That picture has become unbearable enough that courage is finally beginning to outweigh fear. But my child, something more has happened. Something they have not told anyone. There was a recent moment when they came dangerously close to convincing themselves to let you go completely. They may have said internally, "It is too late. I should move on. I should stop thinking about this." They may even have tried to close the emotional door. Yet just as they attempted to accept that ending, something inside them resisted with surprising force. Not fantasy. Not obsession. Recognition. The realization that moving on without telling the truth would not actually be moving on. It would simply be carrying an unfinished truth into every new chapter. That realization has changed the way they see you. They are not only remembering how you made them feel. They are remembering who they were around you. Perhaps more honest. Perhaps more hopeful. Perhaps more alive to possibilities they usually ignored. Perhaps you challenged them without trying. Perhaps you saw something in them before they could see it themselves. And now, as they stand on the edge of finally speaking, they are beginning to wonder whether losing you would also mean losing the version of themselves that your presence once called forward. Yet this story is not asking you to wait breathlessly for a message. It is asking you to remain grounded in your worth while allowing life to reveal what is real. If they come forward, let them come forward fully. If they have something to say, let them say it without you filling in the blanks. Let them carry the responsibility of clarity. Your role is not to translate their silence anymore. Your role is to listen to what is actually offered. Because the truth they are preparing to reveal may not be exactly what you expected. It may include an apology, but also a confession about a decision they made when they were afraid. It may include feelings, but also the reason they disappeared at a moment when you needed honesty most. It may include an admission that someone influenced them, or that advice from people around them pushed them toward caution. It may include a realization that they allowed old experiences to shape how they treated something new with you. And when all of those pieces finally come together, you may understand why the connection felt strong but strangely blocked. Still, there is one piece they have been most afraid to tell you. This is the piece they keep reaching in their mind and then pulling away from. It is not necessarily dark or frightening. It is simply vulnerable enough that admitting it changes the meaning of everything that came before. They have carried this truth privately because saying it aloud would mean they can no longer pretend their choices were neutral. They would have to admit that at one point, they made a deliberate decision about you based on fear rather than what their heart actually wanted. And that decision is the reason their words now sound like a last chance. They know that when they tell you what happened, you may look at the past differently. You may finally understand the exact moment where everything changed. You may understand why communication became inconsistent, why they suddenly became cautious, why there was a shift you could feel but never explain. They have replayed that moment repeatedly, wondering whether they could have chosen differently. And lately, they have stopped asking whether the past can be changed. They have started asking whether truth can still be offered before the future closes. In this fictional spiritual scene, imagine heaven growing quiet now, not because the message is ending, but because the next revelation deserves stillness. Your soulmate is not only preparing to say, "I cared about you." They are preparing to tell you what they did because they cared and were afraid at the same time. They are preparing to tell you who they listened to, what they believed, and what they discovered later that made them realize they had misunderstood something important about you. They are preparing to admit that there was one specific thing they believed about you that influenced everything. And recently, they found out it was not true. That discovery is what shattered their certainty. It is what made old conversations return with new meaning. It is what made them realize you may have been carrying the consequences of a misunderstanding you never even knew existed. It is what finally brought them to this sentence: "This is my last chance to tell you everything. Please don't ignore me." But what they believed about you, who planted that belief, and what they discovered that changed everything is the one part they have still not found the courage to say aloud.